My name is Vivian Rook. I'm 41 years old, and on a Thursday night in October, my family voted me out of the restaurant company I had built with my own hands. They did it during our quarterly family and board dinner at Rook and Ember, the flagship restaurant on Harbor Street. With 12 locations, $40 million in annual revenue, and my name missing from the new org chart. My younger brother Bennett stood at the head of the mezzanine dining room with a glass of red wine in his hand and told everyone I was being removed, for the good of the company. My mother clapped first. My father looked down at his plate and raised his hand with the rest of them. Then Bennett smiled at me and said, "You were always just the help with better keys." At stake was my job, my reputation, the payroll for 418 employees, and the only life I had known since I was 13 years old. Beside my chair was a charcoal gray accordion file with a brass clasp, and inside it was proof my family had never bothered to understand. Before the night was over, one person at table 14 would stop eating, my father's hands would start shaking, and Bennett would learn that keys were not the same thing as ownership. But to understand why I didn't cry when they voted, you have to understand how long I had been waiting for them to finally say out loud what they had believed about me all along. The vote itself took less than 4 minutes. That was the part that stayed with me. 4 minutes to erase 23 years of work. 4 minutes to turn a daughter into a liability. 4 minutes for people who had watched me miss birthdays, cancel vacations, sleep on office sofas, and answer emergency calls at 2 a.m. to decide I had become inconvenient. Bennett had prepared printed packets, thick cream paper, embossed logo, our logo, though he had already started calling it his. The packet said Strategic Leadership Transition across the front, and under that, in smaller letters, Rook Table Group, Next Era. I remember the smell of seared scallops from the kitchen below. I remember the soft clink of forks pausing against plates when Bennett said my name. I remember the dark wood railing of the mezzanine under my left hand and the little notch near table 6, where a delivery cart had hit it during opening week 11 years earlier. I had sanded that notch myself before the inspector came. That was my job, according to my family, not officially. Officially, I was Chief Operating Officer. Unofficially, I was the woman who made sure nobody important ever had to notice the problem. Bennett glanced toward our parents before he started the vote. My mother, Elaine, nodded once. She wore pearl earrings and a cream silk blouse, the kind she always wore when she planned to seem gentle while doing something hard. My father, Grant, sat beside her in a navy blazer with the founder's pin on his lapel. The pin was old. I had ordered 100 of them after our third location opened and given the first one to him because I knew it would make him proud. He had never asked who paid the invoice. Bennett cleared his throat. "Vivian has served this company in a support capacity for a long time," he said. A few board members shifted in their chairs. Naomi Price from our lender lowered her eyes to the packet in front of her. Rosa Ibarra, our pastry director, stood near the service station with a tray of espresso cups and went very still. Support capacity. I looked at Bennett's hands. He had my father's hands, broad and expressive, but he used them differently. My father used his hands to greet people, to clap shoulders, to bless a room into believing he belonged at the center of it. Bennett used his hands to point. He pointed at the packet. He pointed at the new org chart. He pointed toward the empty chair beside him, where I had been seated at every quarterly dinner for 8 years. My chair. Then he looked at me like he expected a scene. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my purse, took out my steel tape measure, and slipped it under the edge of the file so the clasp would stop clicking against the wood when someone bumped the table. Bennett saw it and laughed under his breath. I filed that away too. Welcome back to the Madeline Files, where the quiet parts of family stories finally get spoken in full. This one is for anyone who has ever been treated like the emergency contact for everybody else's life, then called difficult the moment you asked to be seen. Leave a comment with where you're listening from. Subscribe if these stories keep you company. And stay with me. Because the sentence my brother thought would humiliate me was the same sentence that gave me the last clean answer I needed. Before I tell you what was in that file, I need to tell you about the first restaurant. It wasn't called Rook and Ember then. It was called Grant's Harbor Grill, though my mother used to say the name made it sound like we served fried clams out of a bait shop. Maybe we did, in the beginning. It had 12 tables, a counter with red vinyl stools, and a kitchen so narrow that two-line cooks couldn't pass each other without turning sideways. I was 13 when I started helping. Not working, according to my parents. Helping. Family helped. Family pitched in. Family didn't ask about hourly wages or sleep or whether 7th graders should know how to reset a breaker after the ice machine tripped the panel during Sunday brunch. My brother Bennett was 7. He sat in booth 3 with crayons and chicken fingers while I wiped menus with a damp rag. Customers pinched his cheeks and called him handsome. My mother smiled and said, "He's going to run this place one day." Nobody said anything like that to me. I knew where the extra receipt paper was. I knew the produce delivery driver's name was Eddie and that he had a bad knee. I knew the health inspector liked black coffee and hated wet box on the pantry floor. I knew which light switch in the hallway sparked if you touched it with damp fingers. One winter night, the hood vent started screaming during dinner rush. My father climbed onto a prep table with a screwdriver, and I stood below him holding a flashlight. Grease popped in the sauté pan. My mother was at the host stand telling people the wait would only be 20 minutes, which was a lie. Bennett had fallen asleep in booth 3 with his cheek pressed into a paper placemat. "Hold it steady, Viv," my father said. So I did. My arm ached. My wrist shook. The flashlight got hot in my palm. I held it steady anyway because my father sounded scared, and even then I understood something no one had taught me directly. When men like my father felt scared, someone else had to become calm. Later, after the vent stopped screaming, he ruffled Bennett's hair and said, "You slept through the whole adventure, buddy." Then he looked at me and said, "Good girl." I waited for more. I don't know what more would have been. Maybe just, "You helped me." Maybe that was too much for a kid, maybe. "Go sit down." Instead, my mother handed me a stack of menus and asked me to put them back in order. Being needed can look like being loved when you are young enough to mistake exhaustion for belonging. I didn't know that sentence then. I only knew that if I was useful, people kept me close. By 16, I could close the register. By 17, I handled vendor calls when my father was too tired. By 18, I knew our food cost by week and could tell when a bartender was overpouring without checking the cameras. I got into a state college 2 hours away and lasted 1 semester before my father had his first heart scare. It wasn't a dramatic heart attack. Not the kind people talk about years later with their hands over their mouths. It was chest pain, a hospital bracelet, a blocked artery, and my mother standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m, whispering into the phone, "Vivian, I don't know what to do." So I came home. Bennett was in 9th grade by then. He had lacrosse practice, friends with lake houses, and a way of making adults laugh even when he was lying to them. My mother said he needed stability. My father said the restaurant needed me just until things settled. Things never settled. They expanded instead. The second location happened because a landlord on Pine Street offered us a cheap lease after a seafood place failed. My father wanted the address. My mother wanted the dining room. Bennett wanted his picture in the local paper, holding oversized scissors at the ribbon cutting, though he was still in college by then and home only on breaks. I wanted to know why the lease made us responsible for a roof we didn't own. "Not everything has to be a fight, Vivian," my father said when I brought him the clause. "It's not a fight," I said. "It's a roof." He signed it anyway. 6 months later, the roof leaked over table 9 during a rehearsal dinner, and I spent 2 days negotiating with the landlord's attorney, the roofer, and the bride's mother. My father apologized to the guests in person. My mother sent flowers. Bennett posted a picture of the repaired dining room with the caption, "Family Resilience." I paid the emergency roofer on my personal credit card because the company card was maxed from opening costs. That detail stayed with me. The third location was easier because I wrote the lease comments myself before anyone signed. The fourth location almost killed us because the walk-in cooler failed during Labor Day weekend and we had to move $16,000 of seafood in rented vans before dawn. The fifth location taught me about grease interceptor permits. The sixth taught me that a charming landlord is still a landlord. The seventh taught me that payroll errors do not stay errors for long. They become people's rent. By the time we opened the eighth, reporters started calling us a regional hospitality group. My father loved that. He bought new suits. My mother had the original Grant's Harbor Grill photos reframed and hung in the flagship hallway once we renovated the harbor street building into Rook and Ember. Bennett, after failing out of one business program and finishing another one online, came home with ideas. He called them vision decks. I called them expensive guesses, but not to his face. He wanted rooftop cocktails in cities where we didn't own roofs. He wanted immersive coastal branding in towns 50 miles from the coast. He wanted to replace handwritten prep sheets with an app he had invested in through a friend. He wanted title, attention, and applause, and he knew how to make our parents feel as if giving those things to him was the same as preserving the family legacy. My work became harder to explain. A broken pipe was visible, a payroll save was not, a good review was visible, a corrected insurance certificate was not. Bennett could stand at a party and describe the smell of wood smoke and rosemary, and everyone would lean in. I could explain that our delivery access at the new location required an easement before the lease commencement date, and people's eyes would slide toward the wine. "You make everything sound so heavy," my mother told me once. We were standing in the flagship office, the one behind the mezzanine with the low ceiling and the ancient radiator that clanked when the heat came on. I had 3 vendor contracts spread across the desk. "It is heavy," I said. "That doesn't mean it's bad." She touched the back of Bennett's chair. He wasn't in it, but everyone treated empty space around Bennett like it belonged to him. "Your brother brings people in, sweetheart," she said. "You keep things steady. I should have known then." Not because she meant to hurt me. That was the problem. She didn't think it was hurtful. In her mind, she had described the natural order of things. Bennett shined. I steadied. He entered rooms. I made sure the floor held. When the company became Rook Table Group, I was the one who filed the entity paperwork. When we branded the restaurants under Rook and Ember, Rook Market and Emberline Catering, I hired the trademark attorney after Bennett tried to design a logo too close to a hotel chain in Oregon. When our lender required separation between operating assets and real estate exposure, I sat in 3 conference rooms drinking burnt coffee, while men in gray suits explained risk as if I hadn't been living inside it since middle school. My father signed what I put in front of him. That was the great private joke of our family, though only I knew it. Grant Rook, founder and visionary, stopped reading contracts years before the company got complicated. He trusted me to understand them. He resented me for understanding them. Both things were true. "Just mark the tabs," he would say. So I marked the tabs. Sign here, initial here, date here, consent here, assignment here. Sometimes he would squint at a page and say, "Do I need to know what this means?" And I would say, "Yes." Then he would sigh. I learned to make summaries. 1 page, plain language, no legal fog. I put them in blue folders because my father lost white paper on a white desk. He called them my little homework packets. Bennett called them clipboard theater. "Viv has a form for everything," he liked to say. Usually at dinners. Usually when people were laughing. Usually after I had spent the day fixing something he had broken by promising what we could not deliver. I let him laugh because the work still had to be done. I let a lot of things happen because the work still had to be done. There was the time Bennett announced a seafood tower promotion without checking supply, and I spent 48 hours finding enough oysters that wouldn't embarrass us. There was the time he fired a bar manager by text and forgot the man had keys to 3 liquor rooms. There was the time he promised a charity gala we could donate dinner for 200 guests during the same week. 2 of our kitchens were already short-staffed. I called in favors, moved schedules, sent apology notes, covered invoices, and stood behind the scenes while he accepted applause. My family called that loyalty. I called it Tuesday. The steel tape measure came from the original diner. My father bought it at a hardware store on Ashland Avenue after the city made us widen the aisle near the restrooms. It had a dent near the thumb lock and a strip of blue paint on one side from when I used it during the 3rd renovation. I kept it because restaurants are full of people guessing about space. Designers guess, owners guess, guests guess, fire marshals do not. That tape measure lived in my bag for 20 years. I used it to prove that a host stand was 2 inches too wide, that a delivery shelf would block a sprinkler head, that Bennett's beloved banquette concept would leave servers trapped behind table 12, and that a small change to a kitchen pass would cost us 2 seats every turn. He hated that tape measure. "You ever think the brand would feel warmer if you stopped measuring everything?" he asked me once. We were standing in the unfinished Emberline commissary, surrounded by drywall dust and stainless steel tables wrapped in plastic. "I think the brand feels warmer when nobody trips carrying hot soup," I said. He rolled his eyes and took a call from a podcast host. "The strange thing is, I loved the restaurants. That part matters. I loved the sound of the kitchen coming alive before service. I loved the smell of yeast in the commissary at 5 in the morning. I loved watching a new server finally stop being afraid of table maintenance. I loved the way Rosa hummed when she piped pastry cream. I loved the quiet after closing, when chairs sat upside down on tables and the floor still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Not lemons, cleaner, the industrial kind that came in square jugs and left your hands dry if you didn't wear gloves. I loved the staff who texted me pictures of their kids at graduations because I had approved schedule swaps so they could attend. I loved the line cooks who pretended not to care about Christmas bonuses and then shook my hand too hard when they got them. I loved the vendors who called me before raising prices because they knew I would not yell, but I would ask questions they had to answer. I didn't love being invisible. I just learned to function inside it. 3 months before the quarterly dinner, Bennett accidentally forwarded me an investor deck. That was the first crack. The subject line said, "Updated deck for North Star call." I was not supposed to be on the email. I knew that because 30 seconds after it arrived, Bennett sent another message. "Wrong Viv, ignore. There was no other Viv." I opened the deck, not because I was snooping, because my job was to know what promises our company made before those. Promises became invoices, debt, or lawsuits. Slide 1 showed Bennett standing in front of the flagship bar, sleeves rolled up, smiling like he had personally installed the reclaimed beams above him. Slide 2 said, Rook Table Group, founder-led, next-generation growth. Slide 3 had a timeline of expansion. My work appeared under phrases like operational maturity achieved and legacy systems implemented. My name did not appear until slide 18, leadership transition. Vivian Rook, current COO, to shift into advisory role during brand modernization. I sat in my office and read that line twice. Then I looked at the metadata. The file had been created 6 weeks earlier by Bennett's assistant, Lila, revised by Bennett, reviewed by Grant Rook, reviewed by Elaine Rook. My parents had known. I didn't call them. I didn't walk down the hall. I didn't send Bennett a text with a screenshot and a question mark. I printed the deck, put it in a folder marked North Star, and went downstairs to check why Table 22 had complained about a draft. Some lies are more useful when you let them finish growing. 2 weeks later, Naomi Price from Fairline Bank pulled me aside after a lender check-in. Naomi was careful, always in gray suits, always with a pen clipped straight to her notebook. "I hope the transition gives you some breathing room," she said. I looked at her. What transition? Her face changed almost imperceptibly. Not fear. Banking people do not like to show fear. It was calculation. "Bennett mentioned you were looking for a quieter life," she said. I remember the hallway light flickering above us. I remember a worker passing with a tray of water glasses and pretending not to listen. I remember Naomi closing her notebook with one finger inside to save her place. A quieter life, I repeated. That's how he phrased it. I see. She waited for me to say more. I didn't. Instead, I asked, has the bank received revised collateral assumptions for the expansion package? Her eyes narrowed a little. That would be part of the next review. Before that review, I said, please make sure you have current asset schedules, not Bennett's summary. Naomi nodded once, very small. That was when I knew Bennett was not just daydreaming. He was selling a version of the company where I had already agreed to disappear. The board packet arrived late on the Monday before the dinner. I always received board packets first. I built them. I cleaned the numbers, flagged open risks, and added notes in plain English so my father couldn't pretend later that he hadn't understood the issue. This packet came from Bennett's assistant. My name was not on the distribution list. Rosa forwarded it to me because she saw it printed near the office copier and thought it looked strange. The cover said the dinner would include a brief governance item. Brief. Inside was a restructuring resolution, removal of my title, suspension of signing authority, cancellation of certain unvested equity units based on failure to align with new strategic direction, mandatory transition consulting for 90 days at a rate Bennett had apparently invented during happy hour. Non-disparagement language, premises access subject to approval. I stared at that phrase, premises access subject to approval. Then I laughed once, quietly, not because it was funny, because Bennett had finally wandered into the part of the room where the floor did not hold. I did not sleep much that week. On Tuesday morning, my badge failed at the commissary. The reader flashed red twice. I tried again. Red. A delivery driver stood behind me holding a clipboard and 4 cases of goat cheese. System's been weird, he said. Systems usually have help, I said. Darius Bell opened the side door from the inside before I could call anyone. Darius was our night maintenance supervisor for the flagship building and unofficial fixer of everything that hummed, leaked, buzzed, stuck, or smelled wrong after 10 p.m. He wore navy work shirts with his name stitched over the pocket and kept peppermint candies in an old screw jar in the maintenance closet. Your badge dead? He asked. Looks that way. He handed me a temporary access card. Found a few changes in the log last night, he said. Didn't look like your usual. Who made them? He glanced toward the loading dock camera. Admin credentials. Bennett's office. I put the temporary badge in my pocket. Send me the log. Already did, he said. That made my throat tighten more than the lockout had. Not because it was dramatic. Because Darius did not ask me to explain. He saw a door shut in my face and opened it. Later that morning, Rosa found me in the service hallway outside my office. Except, it was not my office anymore. 2 cardboard boxes sat against the wall under the employee bulletin board. My framed certificate from the State Restaurant Association leaned against a case of paper towels. My spare black blazer was folded on top, badly. Someone had tossed my old tape dispenser into the box with the glass award from our 10th anniversary. And the award had chipped at one corner. Rosa looked at the boxes. Then she looked at me. She did not say, "What happened?" She did not say, "Are you okay?" People ask that when they want a yes. Rosa handed me a paper cup of coffee, a clean apron, and a small bakery box tied with butcher's twine. "You look like you forgot lunch again," she said. Inside were 3 almond cookies. I had not eaten since 6:30 that morning. I stood there holding the box, and for one dangerous second I almost cried. Not when my badge failed. Not when I saw my office packed. Not when I read the resolution. Cookies nearly did it. "Thank you," I said. Rosa nodded toward the mezzanine stairs. "They're setting extra tables for Thursday." "How many?" 4. I closed my eyes. Of course they are. Bennett wanted a bigger room. Bigger room. Bigger audience, bigger victory. The mezzanine usually held 36 comfortably, 42 if we tightened service. 4 extra tables would push us over safe spacing near the west railing, especially with the old support column near table 14. I put down the coffee, took the steel tape measure from my bag, and went upstairs. The room was half set, white linens, low candles. Wine glasses lined up like little crystal threats. Bennett had ordered new centerpieces with dried grasses and dark roses that would shed onto the plates before dessert. I measured the aisle between tables 12 and 14, 29 inches. It needed 36. A server named Miles watched from the service station. "Want me to move it?" he asked. "Take table 14 down to a two-top and shift 12 toward the window." Bennett said he wants all the seats. Bennett can want them from the sidewalk if the fire marshal's friend happens to be eating downstairs. Miles grinned despite himself. "Yes, chef." "I'm not chef." "No," he said, "but people move when you say inches." I almost smiled. When Bennett came upstairs 20 minutes later and saw the adjusted floor plan, he looked at me like I had stolen from him. "Are you rearranging my dinner?" "I'm making sure your dinner has legal egress." He stared at the tape measure in my hand. "There it is," he said. "The magic ruler." I snapped it closed and slipped it into my purse. "Anything else?" He stepped closer. He smelled like expensive cologne and coffee. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "after Thursday, you won't have to worry about table spacing anymore." I looked at him for a second, really looked. There was excitement under his cruelty. That was what bothered me. He wasn't conflicted, he was eager. "After Thursday," I said. "You should still worry about table spacing," he laughed. I didn't. That evening, I met Marjorie Finn in the parking lot, outside a copy shop near the courthouse. She hated video calls and said restaurants were too full of people who thought overhearing was the same as knowing. Marjorie was 58. With silver hair cut to her jaw and glasses she wore on a chain without seeming old-fashioned. She had represented us during the lender restructuring 6 years earlier, then represented me privately when I realized my family confused informality with safety. She stood beside her car holding a leather folio. "You brought originals?" she asked. "Certified copies where needed. Working copies in the accordion file. And the access logs? Darius sent them. And the email where Bennett tells staff you're no longer authorized. Printed and forwarded to you." Marjorie opened the folio and looked at me over the top of her glasses. "You understand that once this is served, they will stop pretending this is a family disagreement. They stopped pretending when they packed my office." "Not to themselves," she said. The copy shop sign buzzed above us. A woman walked past carrying a poster tube. Somewhere nearby, a car alarm chirped twice. Marjorie handed me a clean set of documents clipped with black binder clips. "I'll be at the dinner," she said. "As what?" "Guest of Harrow Produce. Their general counsel couldn't attend, and they had a seat. I like their CFO." I stared at her. "You planned that." I accepted an invitation. There's a difference. For the first time that week, I breathed all the way in. "Marjorie, yes? If my mother asks to handle it privately before the vote, will you?" I looked toward the copy shop window. My reflection looked tired. Not broken, just tired in a way good concealer could not fix. "I don't know," I said. Marjorie closed the folio. "Yes, you do. On Thursday afternoon. My mother came to the flagship early. I was in the downstairs prep hall checking the evening timeline with Rosa. The kitchen was already loud, the kind of controlled loud I trusted. Knives against boards, sheet pans sliding into racks, someone calling for parsley, the printer coughing out tickets for staff meal. Elaine appeared at the end of the hall in her cream blouse, holding her phone in both hands. "Vivian," she said. Rosa looked at me, then found a reason to step into the pastry room. My mother smiled at me like she had already won, but her fingers were tight around the phone. "You look nice," she said. I wore black pants, a black blouse, and low heels I could stand in for 12 hours. It was the same thing I wore to most events. My mother only complimented my clothes when she didn't want to discuss the reason she had come. "Thank you." She glanced toward the stairs. "Maybe tonight is not the way to handle this." I waited. She looked smaller for a second. Not physically. My mother was always careful with posture. But something in her face loosened, and I saw the woman who used to sit at the kitchen table, after closing with her shoes off, rubbing the bridge of her nose while I counted cash. "Bennett is excited," she said. "Your father feels strongly, but perhaps a formal vote during dinner is unnecessary." "Then stop it." Her eyes moved back to mine. "What? You're his mother. You're on the board. Stop it," she swallowed. "It isn't that simple." "It is exactly that simple." Behind us, a pan hit the floor in the kitchen, and someone swore softly. My mother flinched as if real life had interrupted her performance. "We don't want to hurt you," she said. "You packed my office into boxes. That was Bennett's timing. Did you tell him not to?" She looked away. There it was, the almost moment. The tiny open door where a different mother might have walked through. Instead, she smoothed her blouse. "Your brother has always felt overshadowed by your control," she said. "My control kept the lights on. Nobody is denying your contribution. They're voting on whether to erase it." Her eyes sharpened. "Don't use words like erase, it makes you sound dramatic." I looked at her, and something inside me went quiet. Not calm. Quiet. There is a kind of silence that arrives when hope finally stops making noise. "I have to check the room," I said. "Vivian." I stopped. "Please don't make tonight harder than it needs to be." I looked back at my mother. I'm not the one who chose tonight. Upstairs, the mezzanine had been polished into a lie. Candles lit, glasses filled. The brass plaque near the entrance shone under the wall sconces. Founded by Grant and Elaine Rook. My mother had ordered it after the renovation, though the bank required the expansion plan I wrote before they approved the loan. And I spent 6 months living between contractors, inspectors, architects, and a plumber named Stan who never once arrived when he said he would. Guests started arriving at 6:30, board members first, then vendors, then family friends who liked to say they remembered us when we were just a diner, though most of them had only discovered us after the second newspaper feature. Senior managers came in wearing the careful expressions of people who know something is wrong but have mortgages. Bennett stood near the entrance accepting praise. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, white pocket square. He looked good. I can say that. He had always been handsome in a way that made people forgive missing pieces. "Big night," someone said to him. "Big next chapter," he answered. I checked the seating chart. I was no longer at my usual seat beside the head of the table. My place card had been moved to the far side near table 14, close to the support column, and 3 seats down from Celia, my aunt. Celia Rook Bell was my father's younger sister. She had our family's eyes and none of our family's appetite for public conflict. She had watched more than she had said for years. She rented a small bookkeeping office from one of the family properties and treated that fact like a leash nobody could see. When I sat down, she touched my wrist. "Viv," she whispered. I looked at her hand until she removed it. "Did you know?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "Not until last week." "That's not no." She looked toward my father. "I thought Grant would come to his senses." I unfolded my napkin. "He doesn't have to. He has you for that." She did not answer. At table 14, Marjorie Finn sat with the Harrow-produced CFO, listening politely to a story about freight costs. She wore a dark green jacket and had a water glass in front of her. No wine, leather folio at her feet. Darius stood near the service entrance, pretending to inspect a thermostat. Rosa moved through the room with espresso cups and a face so neutral it could have passed for marble. At 7:05, Bennett tapped his knife gently against his glass. Conversation softened. My father sat at the head of the long table beneath the framed photo of the original diner. My mother sat to his right. Bennett stood to his left, exactly where I used to stand when presenting quarterly numbers. "Thank you all for being here," Bennett began. "Tonight is about gratitude, legacy, and the future." I looked at the water ring forming under his glass. He thanked our father for vision. He thanked our mother for elegance and heart. He thanked vendors for partnership, board members for trust, managers for execution. He thanked me last. "And Vivian," he said, turning toward me with a soft smile, "for years of support, structure, and sacrifice. Support again." The room gave a polite murmur. I did not move. Bennett clicked a small remote. A screen near the west wall lit up with the title slide from the investor deck. Rook Table Group, Next Era. He talked for 12 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the service door. 7:06 to 7:18. He said modernization 9 times. He said alignment 7 times. He said family 5 times, but only while looking at people who were not me. Then he lifted the cream packet. As part of this next chapter, the board has reviewed a leadership restructuring recommended by the executive committee. There was no executive committee. There was Bennett, our parents, and a lawyer he had found who apparently believed family businesses ran on vibes and letterhead. The proposal, Bennett continued, is to appoint me Chief Executive Officer of Rook Table Group, effective immediately, and to transition Vivian out of the Chief Operating Officer role into a temporary advisory capacity. A fork touched a plate too hard somewhere down the table. My father leaned back. My mother folded her hands. Bennett looked at me as though inviting me to be gracious while he took the house apart. "This is not punitive," he said. "It's compassionate. Vivian has carried a lot. Sometimes the person who builds the scaffolding isn't the right person to design the skyline." I heard Rosa inhale near the service station. Bennett continued. The resolution also suspends Vivian's signing authority pending review, removes her from management communications, and restricts premises access to scheduled transition meetings approved by the CEO's office. There it was. Not the dangerous sentence yet, but close. I glanced at Marjorie. She was looking down at her salad. My father spoke next. "This is about the future, Vivian," he said. "Don't make it personal." That one landed. Not visibly. My face did not change. My hand stayed folded in my lap. But there are sentences that show you where someone has been standing the whole time. Don't make it personal. My father had built his entire public life on calling the company family. He used family in speeches, interviews, lender meetings, staff parties, vendor negotiations, and every time he wanted someone to work harder than the paycheck justified. But when the family harmed me in public, suddenly personal was a problem. "I'll call for the vote," Bennett said. He did it quickly. Sped too quickly for anyone to ask questions without becoming the disruption. My father raised his hand. My mother raised hers after one small pause. 2 board members looked at each other, then raised theirs. One did not. Celia stared at the table. Bennett's hand went up last, though he had already counted the room. "All in favor," he said. My mother clapped softly, just twice. That sound was smaller than the insult that came after, but it cut deeper. Bennett smiled. "Motion carries." He looked towards the sideboard, where his assistant had placed a slim black folder. "We've prepared a separation agreement, Vivian. Very generous, considering the circumstances. 90 days advisory, continued health coverage through year-end, and a standard non-disparagement clause. Of course, your unvested equity units are forfeited based on governance realignment." "Governance realignment," I repeated. He seemed pleased I had spoken. "That's right. And my office? We thought it would be easier to pack it before emotions ran high." A few people looked down. My mother reached for her wine glass and missed the stem on the first try. Bennett stepped away from the screen and came closer to my end of the table. "You should see this as freedom," he said. "No more late nights. No more clipboard emergencies. No more measuring everything to death." He smiled wider. "You were always just the help with better keys." The room went so still, I heard the downstairs printer spit out a ticket. My Aunt Celia closed her eyes. Bennett had expected a laugh. Maybe not from everyone. Maybe just from our parents, or from one of the vendors who wanted to stay on his good side. Nobody gave him one, so he filled the silence himself. "Come on," he said. "We all know Vivian likes being needed, but leadership requires more than holding keys and saying no." I reached for my water glass and took one sip. My hand did not shake. That seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. "You don't have anything to say?" he asked. "I'm listening." He leaned one hand on the table. "Good. Then listen carefully. Effective tonight, Vivian Rook has no authority to enter, represent, license, approve, or interfere with any Rook property, brand, vendor, employee, or strategic initiative." Marjorie put down her fork. That was the sentence she had been waiting for. Bennett continued. because men like him often mistake silence for permission. If you attempt to contact staff, vendors, lenders, landlords, media, or investors on behalf of this company, we will consider it interference. If you enter any Rook property without my approval, we will consider it trespassing. My father shifted in his chair, not because he understood, because the word trespassing sounded harsh in a room full of people. "Bennett," my mother said softly. He held up one hand. "No, Mom, we need clarity." I looked at him. "Do we?" "Yes," he said. "We do. This company can't move forward with you standing in every doorway." I set my napkin on the table. "Bennett, when you say Rook property, do you mean the operating company or the building?" He blinked. "What?" "The property. You just said I would be trespassing on Rook property. Are you referring to the operating company's assets or the building?" He laughed. It was too loud. "Oh my God, Vivian, this is exactly what I mean. Nobody wants a vocabulary lesson. I'm asking because those are different things. They're not different in any way that matters tonight." Marjorie stood. Nobody noticed at first except me, Darius, and Rosa. Bennett looked down at the black folder his assistant had given him. "I think we're done here," he said. "Sign the agreement by Monday, and we can keep this dignified." I reached down beside my chair and picked up the charcoal gray accordion file. The brass clasp gave a small click. That sound moved through me like a memory. My brother thought the folder was a prop. He had no idea it was the only thing in the room that knew exactly who owned what. I did not slide it to Bennett. I slid it to my father. It moved across the polished table and stopped beside his bread plate. He frowned. "What is this? You should read the first page." "Vivian," my mother said. "Not now." I looked at her. "You chose everyone." That was the first time I saw real fear in her face. My father opened the clasp. The first page was clipped separately. Clean copy, large tab, recorded deed transfer, Harbor Street property. He read the first line. Then he read it again. His color changed slowly, like heat leaving a room. Bennett watched him. "Dad?" My father did not answer. Marjorie stepped away from table 14 and walked toward the long table with her leather folio against her side. "Good evening," she said. Bennett looked annoyed. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Marjorie Finn, Counsel for Harbor Slate Properties LLC, and Counsel of Record for the Rook and Ember trademark holding entity." The words did not land all at once. That was the interesting thing. People heard them, but they needed a second to place them inside the room. Naomi Price sat up straighter. Bennett glanced at my father. "What is she talking about?" Marjorie removed a document from her folio. "Mr. Rook, before I serve these notices, do you want to repeat, for the record, that Ms. Rook is barred from a building whose landlord is Harbor Slate Properties?" Bennett's mouth opened, then closed. My father looked at me. "Vivian." I did not answer him. "Not yet." Marjorie continued in the same calm voice she probably used to order tea. "For clarity, the Harbor Street premises occupied by Rook and Ember are owned by Harbor Slate Properties LLC. The managing member is Vivian Rook. The operating company leases the premises under a master lease dated June 1st, 6 years ago." "That's an affiliated entity," Bennett said quickly. "It's part of us." "No," Marjorie said. "It is affiliated by contract. It is not owned by Rook Table Group." Bennett looked at my father again. "Dad?" My father's hands rested on the page. I could see the slight tremor in his left thumb. He knew his signature. That was why I had given the file to him. Marjorie set another document on the table. The Central Commissary Facility on Ashland is also leased through Harbor Slate. 4 additional locations operate under lease assignments held or guaranteed by the same structure. The operating company has use rights as long as it remains in compliance. "This is ridiculous," Bennett said. "Vivian set up paperwork." "That doesn't mean she owns the company." "I didn't say she owns the operating company," Marjorie said. "I said the operating company does not own the walls it stands in." A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp. Something quieter. A collective adjustment. Bennett hated it. He pointed at me. "She's doing this because she's angry." Marjorie turned a page, "Miss. Rook has not spoken beyond asking you to clarify your statement." That made Bennett flush. My mother leaned toward my father. "Grant," she whispered. "What did you sign?" The cruelty of that question would have made me laugh on another night. What did you sign? For years, they had treated my summaries like chores. They had signed marked tabs while joking that I loved paperwork. They had trusted my competence as long as it stayed beneath them. Now the paper sat in front of them, like a guest they had forgotten inviting. My father's voice came out rough. This was during the bank restructuring. Yes, I said. Everyone looked at me. I kept my voice low. Fairline required separation of real estate exposure after Thine Street roof issue and the Mill Road flood claim. We discussed it in 3 board meetings. I wrote summaries. You signed the consent authorizing me to secure premises and brand continuity through affiliated entities. Bennett shook his head. That was administrative. No, Marjorie said. It was legal. Naomi Price had opened her copy of the board packet and was making a note in the margin. Bennett noticed. Naomi, this doesn't affect the expansion package. Naomi looked up. It affects the collateral assumptions you sent us, he faltered. I saw the moment he understood that the room had shifted, not enough, but a little. So for the fully tool he knew. Family. Vivian, he said, softening his voice. You could have told me you were worried. I looked at him. You locked me out of my office. That was a misunderstanding. You changed my commissary badge. Security update. You told the bank I wanted a quieter life. His jaw tightened. My mother's eyes moved to Bennett. Is that true? He ignored her. You're twisting this, he said. You always do this. You bury everyone in technicalities until they give up. Darius stepped forward from the service entrance. He did not rush. Darius never rushed unless water was involved. Miss Finn, he said, you want the maintenance logs now? Bennett turned. Why is maintenance involved? Marjorie nodded to Darius. If you would. Darius pulled a folded packet from inside his clipboard. For the last 18 months, he said, building repair approvals for Harbor Street went through Ms. Rook as managing member for Harbor Slate. HVAC, hood suppression, west stair repair, grease line access, emergency electrical. Notices were copied to the operating company, but approvals came from ownership. Bennett gave a sharp laugh. Darius, with respect, you fix sinks. Darius looked at him. And I know who pays me when the sink is attached to a building. The room did not laugh. It did something worse for Bennett. It understood. Marjorie placed another document beside the deed. This is the trademark assignment for the Rook and Ember brand family, including Rook and Ember, Emberline, and associated marks. The marks are licensed to the operating company under agreement so long as certain standards, payments, and governance provisions are maintained. Bennett stared. You trademarked our name. I protected the brand, I said. Our name, he repeated. My father finally looked up. Bennett. But Bennett was too far into the fall to hear warning. She stole the family name, he said. I felt something almost tender then, but not toward him. Toward the girl I had been, sitting at the diner counter, alphabetizing vendor invoices while Bennett slept in the booth. She would have tried to explain. She would have wanted him to understand she had done it for all of us. I did not explain to be forgiven. I explained for the record. The original mark was abandoned when Dad missed the renewal during the 5th location expansion. The hotel group in Oregon sent a demand letter because Bennett's proposed logo conflicted with theirs. I hired counsel, cleaned up the filings, assigned the marks to a holding entity, and licensed them back to the operating company, so the restaurants could keep using the name. That's not how family does business, Bennett snapped. Marjorie looked at him. It is how businesses stay businesses. Celia made a sound beside me. Small, pained. I looked at her. She had one chance. I did not ask her for it. I would not beg my aunt to tell the truth. But the room had opened, and she was standing near the edge of it, with both hands on the railing. Celia stood slowly. My father closed his eyes. Celia, he said. She looked at him. No, Grant. Her voice shook, but she kept going. You knew. I was in your office when Vivian brought the blue folder after the bank meeting. You told her to mark the tabs. You said, do whatever keeps the lenders calm, my mother whispered. Celia. Celia's eyes filled. She tried to make you read it. That sentence was not dramatic. It was not clever. It was worse. It was plain. My father stared at his plate. Bennett looked around the room, searching for someone who still belonged to the version he had written. He found my mother. "Mom," he said. Elaine stood halfway, then sat again. "Vivian," she said, voice soft and trembling, "we can discuss all of this privately." "No," Bennett said. "No, this is insane. She doesn't get to ambush us." I looked at him for a long second. "You called the vote at dinner." He pointed toward the file. "You brought a weapon. I brought the documents. Same thing with you." Marjorie lifted the notices. "Mr. Rook, your statements tonight create several immediate concerns. Attempting to bar the landlord's managing member from the premises. Attempting to assume unauthorized control over licensed marks. Directing staff and vendors not to communicate the party responsible for premises compliance. Misrepresenting asset control to a lender." Bennett's face had gone red. "You can't serve anything during a family dinner." Marjorie looked around the table. "I was told this was a governance meeting. That was the line that broke something. Not in me. In the room." One of the board members, Paul Levin, removed his glasses and placed them on the packet. Paul had owned manufacturing companies for 30 years and rarely spoke unless silence became more expensive. "I move to pause the CEO appointment pending legal review," he said. Bennett turned on him. "You already voted." "I voted based on incomplete information." My father's head snapped up. Paul did not look at him. "And I would like revised asset schedules from council before we proceed with any transition." Naomi closed her folder. "Fairline will also need to suspend review of the expansion package until ownership, lease rights, and brand licensing are clarified." The word suspend hit Bennett like a thrown glass. He looked at me then, not as his sister, not as the help, not as the woman with better keys, as the obstacle he had failed to measure. "You planned this," he said. "No," I said, "you planned this. I prepared for it." He flinched. My mother began to cry then, quietly, beautifully, in the way she cried at charity luncheons and funeral receptions. She pressed a napkin under one eye. "Vivian, sweetheart," she said, "don't let strangers turn us against each other." I looked at Rosa near the service station, at Darius standing with his clipboard, at Marjorie with her folio, at Naomi with her closed folder, at Celia, finally standing but too late to save what she could have saved years earlier. "They're not the ones who raised their hands," I said. My father pushed back his chair. "We can fix this as a family." That was the pivot. Cruelty to concern, authority to softness, public power to private pleading. I had seen it before with vendors, with staff, with landlords, with anyone my family underestimated until they needed something. Bennett spoke over him. "Vivi, come on." I hated that name. He only used it when he wanted something and thought childhood could be used like a spare key. "Let's step into the office," he said. "We'll figure this out. You pack the office." His mouth tightened. "Fine, conference room." "I'm not leaving the room." "Why?" "Because you want to humiliate us." I looked at the new org chart still glowing on the screen behind him. "No, I wanted you to stop before this room became necessary." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Marjorie served the notices. She did it neatly. One copy to Bennett, one to my father as board chair, one to company counsel, who had been sitting very still near the end of the table and had the look of a man deciding whether his malpractice carrier would enjoy this story. The notices were not theatrical. No one slammed anything. They were paper, dates, clauses, cure periods, preservation demands, instructions not to interfere with premises access, or licensed marks pending review. That was the thing my family had never respected about paper. Paper does not need to shout. Bennett flipped through the first notice too fast to read it. "This doesn't mean anything until a court says it does." Marjorie's expression did not change. "That is one way to spend money." Paul Levin stood. "I think we should adjourn." My mother wiped her eyes. "Please, everyone, we don't need to make this uglier." Rosa quietly removed a tray of untouched desserts from the sideboard. Creme brulee, espresso tartlets, almond cakes. Bennett had ordered 3 dessert courses because he wanted the dinner to feel abundant. Most plates were still full. Naomi approached me while people began gathering their coats and packets. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I nodded. Thank you for closing the folder. She understood what I meant. Bennett came around the table once most of the guests had started to leave. His face had rearranged itself into something almost brotherly. Vivian, he said. Listen, I was harsh. I'll own that. I waited. But you have to see how this looks. You're going to scare staff. Vendors, investors. You'll hurt people just to prove a point. There it was. The old room, the old flashlight, the old stack of menus. Fix it, Vivian. Keep it steady. Don't let anyone see what we did. You told 418 people, through a packet and a speech, that the person who runs their payroll was disposable, I said. You scared them before I opened the file. We can issue a joint statement. No. His eyes hardened. Don't be stupid. My father said his name sharply. Bennett swallowed the next word. I picked up my purse. My steel tape measure was still inside, heavy, familiar, dented near the thumb lock. My mother came toward me then, moving around chairs as if they had been placed in her way by someone careless. Vivian, please, she said. You have made your point. I looked at her. That sentence almost made me sadder than the vote, because she still thought this was about making a point. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm stopping. Her face crumpled. Stopping what? Running ahead of the consequences with a broom. She reached for my hand. I let her touch my fingers. Then I gently pulled away. Celia stood near the railing, crying silently. She looked at me like she wanted absolution. I did not have any to hand out that night. Viv, she said. I should have said something sooner. Yes, I said. She nodded as if the word had cost her exactly what it should have. Downstairs, the dining room was still open. Guests who knew nothing about our family ate chowder and smoked trout dip under warm lights. Servers moved carefully. The world had not stopped because my family had finally been seen. Rosa waited near the staff entrance. You want me to pack staff meal? She asked. I looked toward the kitchen. What is it? Chicken, rice, green beans. Nothing fancy. I had not eaten since the almond cookies. I'll sit, I said. Rosa nodded once, as if that was the answer she had been hoping for. She led me to the small staff table near dry storage. It had a chipped corner and a stack of folded towels at one end. Darius was already there, drinking coffee out of a mug that said World's Okayest Dad, though he did not have children. Miles brought me without making a speech. Nobody asked me to explain the folder. Nobody asked what happened upstairs. Rosa set down a fork wrapped in a paper napkin. Eat while it's hot, she said, so I did. The next morning, Bennett's appointment was formally paused. By noon, Fairline had requested corrected asset schedules. By 4, 2 board members had asked for independent counsel. By Monday, the expansion deal he had been bragging about was not dead, but it was no longer his trophy. It had become a problem with footnotes. I did not take victory calls. There were plenty of calls. My father left 3 voicemails. My mother sent 7 texts, the first saying, "Please call me," and the last saying, "I hope you are proud of what you have done to this family." Bennett sent one long message about loyalty, damage, and how outsiders would use this against us. Then, at 11:30 that night, he sent, "I'm sorry about the keys comment." Not sorry he said it. Sorry about it. I did not respond. Marjorie handled formal communication. That helped. Not because I couldn't speak for myself, but because I had spoken for everyone for too long. Legal letters are useful when people treat conversation like a hallway they can drag you into. The employees were protected first. That was the only part I insisted on before anything else. Payroll remained uninterrupted. Vendor payments tied to perishable goods were cleared. Managers received a plain statement saying operations would continue under existing site. Leadership while governance and asset agreements were reviewed. No drama, no family language, no next chapter. Just facts. Bennett hated facts. He tried to hold a staff meeting 2 days later at the flagship. He sent a message saying attendance was mandatory. Darius forwarded it to Marjorie because it included instructions about premises access that violated the notice he had been served. The meeting became optional. Half the senior staff did not attend. Rosa did, but only because she had dough resting. She told me later Bennett stood in front of the kitchen pass and said, Vivian is emotional right now. A dishwasher named Luis apparently said. She seemed pretty calm to me. I wish I had seen Bennett's face. My parents asked for a private meeting the following week. I agreed, because Marjorie said it would look unreasonable not to, and because some part of me wanted to know which version of themselves they would bring. We met in the conference room above the commissary, not the flagship office. I chose the room because it had glass walls and no family photographs. My father looked older in daylight. My mother wore soft blue and no pearls. Bennett was not there. That was supposed to make it feel safer. We should have handled the transition differently, my father said. The transition. I looked at him for a long second. You still believe the problem was the handling? His jaw flexed. I believe you forced our private business into public. You voted at dinner. We thought you would understand. That I was being removed, that Bennett needed room to lead. I almost smiled, but there was nothing funny in it. Dad, Bennett did not need room. He needed my chair, my systems, my staff relationships, my lender credibility, my leases, and my silence. My mother put a hand to her throat. You make him sound like a thief. I'm describing what happened. He's your brother. I know exactly who he is. That made her cry again. But this time it didn't move me the way it once would have. Not because I wanted her hurt. Because I finally understood that her tears had often functioned like a stop sign. Everyone had to pause for Elaine's pain. Mine could wait until after cleanup. My father leaned forward. What do you want? It was the first honest question he had asked me in years. I want a controlled transition that protects employees, vendors, and guests. I want Bennett removed from premises and brand decisions until review is complete. I want the board to receive full records, not summaries from him. I want my personal guarantees released where possible. I want written acknowledgement that I did not voluntarily resign, retire, or step back. My mother stared at me. You came with a list. Yes, of course you did. There was the old contempt again, softened by fear but still alive. I gathered my papers. My father looked at the list and then at me. You always were prepared. He said it like an accusation. No, I said. I was always required to be. After that meeting, things moved in the slow, unglamorous consequences often move. Not with thunder. With email threads, calendar holds, revised agreements, board minutes, bank calls, vendor assurances, password audits, signature removals, notices sent certified mail. Bennett lost the expansion package first. Then he lost interim CEO authority. Then he lost the right to speak for the brand while the trademark license was reviewed. Publicly, the company described it as governance stabilization. Privately, everybody knew the dinner had done what Bennett feared most. It had changed the story. For years, the family version had been simple. Grant founded, Elaine refined, Bennett inspired, Vivian supported. After that night, people started using different verbs. Vivian structured, Vivian protected, Vivian warned, Vivian knew. My father hated that. My mother hated it more. Bennett tried to meet me once outside the commissary. He waited by my car in a wool coat. He probably thought made him look humbled. It was raining lightly, the kind of cold rain that turns parking lot oil into rainbows under the lights. Vivian, he said. I stopped 6 feet away. You shouldn't wait by my car. I just want 5 minutes. You can email Marjorie. I don't want to talk to your lawyer. I want to talk to my sister. I looked at him. You had my sister number. You called a vote instead. He put his hands in his pockets. I was angry. You were rehearsed. That landed. I saw it. He looked away toward the loading dock. I'm sorry for what I said. Which part? He exhaled. The help with keys thing. I waited. And the trespassing thing, he added. And telling the bank I was stepping back. He rubbed his forehead. I was trying to position the company. And packing on my office? That was Leela Bennett. Fine, I told her to. The rain ticked softly on my car roof. He looked younger suddenly, but not young enough for it to matter. What do you want me to do? He asked. Stop asking me to design your exit. His face hardened. I'm trying to apologize. No, you're trying to find the sentence that makes me useful again. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, You're really going to choose paperwork over family. I opened my car door. No, Bennett, I was the help with better keys, so I'm keeping the keys. I got into the car before he could answer. That was the last thing I said to him without counsel copied. A month later, the flagship still opened every day. That mattered to people who didn't care about family drama and just wanted dinner at 7:30. It mattered to servers who needed tips. It mattered to line cooks, dishwashers, hosts, prep teams, bartenders, bookkeepers, and the woman who delivered flowers every Friday morning and had been doing it since the original diner. But it opened differently. Bennett's photo came down from the lobby wall, not dramatically. The frame had been part of a temporary next-generation display, and Rosa said the hook was crooked anyway. The board installed interim professional management for the operating company. My father resigned as chair, though the announcement used kinder words. My mother stopped attending staff events. Celia gave up the bookkeeping office she had rented from the family property and sent me a handwritten apology. I read it once. I believed she meant it. I also did not mistake regret for repair. Darius stayed. Rosa stayed. Naomi stayed professional, which was all I needed from her. Marjorie sent invoices so detailed they were almost poetry, though I would never tell her that. As for me, I stopped going to the flagship before sunrise. The first week felt wrong. My body woke up at 4:50 anyway, ready for reports. I would reach for my phone, and then remember I did not have to be the first person to know every broken thing. I still checked what I was legally responsible for. I still protected the premises, the brand, the employees through transition, but I stopped acting like panic was proof of care. One Thursday afternoon, Rosa asked me to come by the commissary. "Bring your tape measure," she said. "For what? You'll see." I went because Rosa did not ask for pointless things. The commissary break room had always been an embarrassment. Too small, bad lighting, a vending machine that ate dollar bills, two mismatched tables, and a microwave with a door you had to lift before it would close. It was one of those spaces owners forget because guests never see it. Rosa stood in the middle of the room with Darius, Miles, and 3 folding chairs. "We're fixing this," she said. Darius held up a sketch on lined paper. "New table here, shelves there, real coffee machine if Rosa gets her way. I will get my way," Rosa said. She pointed at my bag. "Measure." For a second, I just stood there. Then I took out the steel tape measure. The dent near the thumb lock caught the overhead light. Same tool, same weight, different room. I hooked the end against the wall while Darius held the other side. Rosa argued that people needed more space by the coffee. Miles said the shelves should be lower because everyone was tall. We measured the room twice because the first time Darius stood in front of the outlet and gave us the wrong clearance. Nobody laughed at the tape measure. Nobody called it clipboard theater. Nobody said I was making things heavy. We just measured what we needed and made room for it. A few weeks after that, Rosa invited me to staff meal again, not because everything had fallen apart, just because there was food. She set an extra plate at the small table, and this time I did not feel like a guest hiding from my own family's damage. I sat down. The rice was overcooked. The chicken was good. Darius complained about the coffee machine budget. Miles told a story about a guest who tried to order soup, medium rare. Rosa rolled her eyes and slid an almond cookie onto my napkin without looking at me. I put the tape measure on the table beside my fork because it had been digging into my hip. Rosa glanced at it. "Good," she said. "We may need that later." That was all. No speech, no rescue, just a place at the table and work worth doing. My parents still send messages through lawyers when they need to. Bennett eventually took a job with a hotel group in another state. I heard he tells people family business is complicated. He is not wrong. He is just incomplete. I kept Harbor Slate. I kept the brand structure clean. I negotiated a transition that protected employees and stopped protecting egos. Over time, I built something smaller out of the commissary and the flagship property. Not 12 locations, not a $40 million story people could use at parties. Something steadier, training kitchens, staff development. A bakery program Rosa runs like a benevolent dictator. Lease terms that people actually read before signing. The brass plaque at the flagship still says, "Founded by Grant and Elaine Rook." I left it there, not because they deserved the whole story, because I don't need every wall to correct them. Some nights when I lock up, I still hear echoes of the old diner, the hood vent, the register drawer, my father asking me to hold the flashlight steady, my mother telling me Bennett brought people in while I kept things steady. For a long time, I thought steady meant staying. It doesn't. Sometimes steady means putting the file on the table, letting people read what they signed, walking out with the keys they mocked you for carrying. That's my story. A dented steel tape measure, 4 minutes at a family dinner, and an extra plate at a table where nobody asks me to earn my seat. If someone in your life only values you when you are useful, take this as your sign to look closely at what you have been holding together and who disappears when you stop. Leave a comment if you have ever been the one everyone depended on, but nobody thanked. And subscribe to the Madeline Files for more stories where quiet people finally let the records speak.